So jumping into the system here, we're going to quickly start with a dashboard. This dashboard here is showing us our compliance as an organization to those key laws, regulations, and best practices Brian mentioned. So in our example, we're looking at the HIPAA audit protocol. We're looking at 45 CFR 164, also known as HIPAA. We've got NIST CSF and others. So we're able to quickly see at a macro level, how are we doing as an organization to the key drivers to our compliance program. It allows us to quickly see, in the green, from a HIPAA audit protocol perspective, we're at 72% of those controls have been implemented or deemed to be operating effectively. We have something about 8%, 9% here that is not implemented. And we're even keeping track of what we would call a partially implemented, those that we're covering off a portion of the obligation, but there's still work to be done as an organization. And this is great because it starts to give us that very targeted view of the world where we're using a content offering like Edgile's automated regulatory compliance to drive an assess once, test once, satisfy many model, whereby we're looking at all those kind of harmonized requirements for things like passwords and user access reviews and the like. But then we're able to kind of tease that out and show for a particular regulation, how are we doing as an organization? And this is great. We can see this at a macro level. We can also take this to one particular application or process or function in the system and really filter this down and really start to see, how are we doing at that macro level or micro level, excuse me. This all starts with an authority document, ServiceNow's term for all those different laws, regulations, and best practices. What we have in our instance today is an example of our healthcare provider with research content pack. So that includes all of your NIST and FSMA related requirements for those federal research arms of your provider business. This includes all of the breach notification and state privacy laws, in addition to all of the HIPAA and related content. So we've got nearly 300 in our example today. We're going to dive into one authority document. We'll just double click down on HIPAA for our example today. I'll give this a second to pull up. Here we go. And we're looking at one authority document as part of Edgile's content. We're providing a description, a URL to the verbatim source, but more importantly, we've taken each of these authority documents and decomposed them into a series of citations. So in our example here, we have 150 citations for HIPAA, and these citations represent the different sentences, paragraphs, and sections of the authority document. When we look at a citation, we're providing the verbatim language directly out of the source. We are not editorializing it or modifying it anyway. All we're doing is breaking it down into these bite-sized topical chunks. And we in turn map these citations to a control objective. So this one here is talking about periodically reviewing access. We've mapped that to our control objective titled attestation and certification of accounts. When we get to the control objective, this is where it all really starts to come together and we can drive that assess once, test once, satisfy many model. So for this control objective for user access reviews, we've got linkages back to HIPAA, back to our internal policies and standards, as well as Cloud Security Alliance, some FDA requirements. And if we were to scroll down a little further here, we get into ISO, HIPAA audit, and a little further down is some of the NIST guidance. So it helps us determine, for a particular topic like user access reviews, what do we need to be doing as an organization based on all of our regulatory drivers. So we can tell the field that very concise Reader's Digest version, if you will, version of all those different regulations so they understand what controls they need to be implementing at the end of the day. We recognize that risk is only one side of the coin when you think of integrated risk and compliance, the other aspect being the ability to look at it from a risk perspective. So for every control objective, we have a corresponding risk statement. And this begins to form the basis of a risk register for information and technology risk. As part of our content, we're providing this description to help you understand the potential risks that face your organization, as well as default inherent impact and likelihood values based on what we've seen in industry. We encourage our clients to tailor those to their business, as well as consider what their residual risk is, kind of at a macro level, so that they can start to build a comprehensive view of the world for risk management. The last piece to touch on before we continue would be the ability to roll all of this information up. So we're able to take those risk statements and use some taxonomy to start to look at how are we doing in topical areas. So we're looking at 4 different risk topics as it relates to identity and access management, and we're able to quickly see inherent and residual risk, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and start to understand where investments are paying off and where there's work to be done. The nice thing is, if there's any questions from business leaders and the different stakeholders, we can actually trace these risks directly back to those different laws, regulations, and best practices, so they can understand why we need to be doing this and the potential threats to our business.